What do you think of when you reminisce about high school? Do you remember old friends, an embarrassing mistake, or even a lost love? What about the crimes and tragedies that occur on the grounds where education and growth are supposed to be the focus? Are you even aware of the seedier events that have occurred at your school, or have they yet to be uncovered and revealed to the world? What truly dark secrets lie just beneath the surface of the rumors, myths, and legends that surround our institutions of learning? It's December 2nd, 1981, at 6:30 in the morning, in front of Tustin High School. The sun is yet to warm the cold, crisp air. Without warning, the sound of screeching tires break through the light hum of the 5 freeway opposite the campus. A pickup truck, speeding down Laguna Road, now El Camino Real, barrels out of control off the street and onto the sidewalk. The truck then smashed into a large tree with enough force to pull it from the ground. Witnesses from the neighborhood call the police to the site of the accident, but when the authorities arrive, they find only an empty truck. The driver had fled the scene and left behind no evidence, even eluding the sight of any of the witnesses. The officers investigated the scene and surrounding area, but they still found nothing. Suddenly, one of the officers heard a man's voice calling out to him. He looked up to see a custodian from the high school approaching him with a grim, shocked look on his face, who then informed him that a body had been found on the grounds. The officers were then led onto the campus, where the body had been discovered. To their shock, hanging over the side of the wall of the science building roof was the bloodied body of a teenage boy. Over the next 4 decades, the legend of the body went from strange mystery to urban myth, with all of the details having been changed or even being absorbed by another campus tragedy altogether. For instance, the former students we were able to interview who had heard the tale of the corpse on the roof seemed to have been told drastically different tales, from a bank robber fleeing the police with a gunshot wound to a mobster hiding from an assassin. However far-fetched that gossip may sound, the true sordid past of Tustin High requires no embellishment or exaggeration, with real accounts of faculty corruption, student abuse, gang activity, and a gruesome, bloody hate crime. The following is an inquiry into these accounts and the separation of the gossip from the truth behind the disreputable, controversial, and appallingly fatal events that have taken place at Tustin High School. The century-old campus, which has changed considerably over the years, was originally a field of orange trees, like most of the surrounding area. With the help of Charles Edward Utt, 15 acres were purchased on Laguna Road between Newport Avenue and Red Hill, and a visually stunning neoclassical building was built. The brand new campus, then called Tustin Union High, included a 1,000-seat auditorium, an outdoor Greek theater, domestic science department, mechanical and manual training departments, athletic field, gymnasium, and swimming pool. In 1966, the original building was judged to be unsafe in the likely case of an earthquake. It took wreckers 10 days to demolish the beautiful structure during July of that year. The old building was then replaced with a new expanded facility on 32 acres, which many agree completely lacks the artistic charm of the original Tustin Union High building. The new campus came with new stadium seating, baseball fields, tennis courts, and what at the time was a state-of-the-art science building, where a decade and a half later, the body of a 15-year-old boy was found covered in blood. At first, the investigating officers believed the body belonged to the hit-and-run incident in front of the school, but the truck carried none of the boy's blood, which would have been hard to prevent given his gory state. The boy was wearing blue pants, a blue jacket, striped shirt, but no shoes, and seemed to have just appeared on the roof. His life was as much of a mystery as his death, for still so little is known about him. The family had just recently immigrated from Vietnam and spoke very broken English. They were able to insist he was a good child that had never and would never involve himself with illegal or dangerous activities. But with the lack of a translator, the language barrier proved to be too difficult to surpass. Neighborhood witnesses spoke of their dogs barking in the dark early hours and seeing a number of people grouped together on the school grounds, but could not make out any details because of the lack of light. In 2015, the case was reopened and investigated by Detective David Nguyen, but no new information has been released up to present day. Not knowing the truth of what happened to a loved one who was brutally taken from you must be unbearable and tormentous. But sometimes learning the details of their demise can be equally, if not more frightening and torturously gut-wrenching. In 1996, on January 28th, 24-year-old Tin Min Lee was taking advantage of the empty tennis courts on the north side of campus, where he liked to practice rollerblading. Lee had immigrated to the United States when he was 12 years old. He not only graduated from UCLA in 1993 with a double major in biology and English, but was also a graduate from Georgetown University with a master's in physiology, as well as the president of the Vietnamese Student Association. The highly educated man often skated on the tennis courts without issue, but this time would prove fatally different. Speeding around the nets, practicing his turns, he noticed two people enter the gate separating the courts from the outside. They were rough-looking white males. The innocent Lee, unsure of what to do, continued skating. One of the men moved behind Lee, while the other confronted and stopped him. This frightened Lee at first, but he was momentarily relieved when the man smiled at him and said, "Oh, I thought I knew you." Lee began to go around the man when he was attacked by them both. Two assailants punched and kicked the poor man until he fell to the ground in pain. While standing over him, one of the men pulled out a butcher's knife from his pocket and motioned it towards Lee, who replied in terror, "You can have whatever you want. You only have a key." To which the monstrous man said, "Gun or car?" Then relentlessly stabbed Lee in the side 7 to 8 times, till he rolled to his stomach in agony, where the man drove the blade into his back 18 to 19 times. Then Lee, going into shock, laid flat on his back when his throat was slit and he was stabbed 20 more times in the heart, while the man watching yelled, "Kill him! Kill him! Do it again!" The two men then casually left the scene. Lee's body was discovered the next morning. A fervent investigation into the gruesome murder led to the discovery of a letter in which Gunnar Lindberg bragged in excruciating detail about his sickening act to an old cellmate. Permeated with misspellings, gang signs, and morbidly ironic smiley faces, Lindberg states, quote, "Oh, I killed a Jap a while ago. I stabbed him to death at Tustin High School. I walked up to him, Dominic was with me, and I seen this guy rollerblading, and it had a knife," unquote. He then callously narrates the horrid events, even giving the number of times he had stabbed him in each part of Lee's body. It seems Lindberg, who was 21, and 17-year-old Dominic Christopher were looking to celebrate the Cowboys' Super Bowl victory by, quote, "killing a Jap." After they left Lee's bleeding body lying on the tennis courts, Lindberg wrote, "I wanted to go back and look, so he did. He was dying just then, taking in some bloody gasps of air, so I nudged his face with my shoe a few times." After the final brutality, the bloodthirsty pair bought cigarettes, then returned to Lindberg's residence where they played video games, smoked cannabis, and watched horror movies. Once the letter had been examined, the Tustin police acquired a search warrant and found the hateful duo in a den of white supremacy. Among a plethora of Nazi and white supremacist propaganda, they found a poster celebrating the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, reading, "If only we had shot 4 more, could have had the rest of the week off work." During the trial, Sergeant Ronald Miller of the Tustin Police Department testified that he had been dealing with skinheads and other racists for 10 years, and that a white supremacist is a racist who is oriented towards the superiority of the white race, believing that it's above all others, intending to view minorities as subhumans. Lindbergh was the first person to be sentenced to death for a hate crime-motivated homicide in California and is currently awaiting his demise in San Quentin. From 1992 on to 2010, California had the most school deaths by more than triple other states, with the majority being gang-related shootings. In the late 90s and early 2000s, gang activity was at an all-time high in Tustin as well. A look at nearly 2 decades of crime statistics reveals that Tustin's Part 1 crimes, such as homicide, rape, robbery, assault, burglary, larceny, arson, and auto theft, hit their peak in 1998 with a decline in 2010. There are a vast number of gangs operating and residing in Tustin during this time, such as the Deuce Trey Crips, Los Wickeds, Barrio Brown Revolution, Maniacs, Laurel Hood Tustin, Los Crooks, Alley Boys, and many others. But was there a connection to any of these gangs and the corruption that occurred on campus? In 2006, Tustin police searched the home of Ramon Hernandez Serrano, a wrestling coach and campus security for the school. Acting on a tip, they found 2 bottles of injectable steroids and 9 counterfeit $50 bills in an envelope. Serrano was then arrested and shortly released on $20,000 bail. Police Sergeant Paul Garrigevan commented, "Most of the case was about counterfeiting. The steroids were a happenstance." And in an attempt to assuage the parents of students, he added, "There's nothing that leads us to believe there's an immediate concern toward any of the kids." But how reliable is that statement? The one constant in all of our interviews with former Tustin alumni was that each one of them knew of Serrano involving students in either the sale or usage of steroids, manipulating them in some way. He was known to befriend the more wild students, and somewhat secretly allow them to break the rules. Could this have been his way of grooming future criminal allies? Unfortunately, we were unable to find any further information on the case, leading us to believe there was some sort of deal made by Serrano that included keeping his shameful dealings on campus off the record. Could he have been employed by one of the many gangs thriving in Tustin at the time? Was the high school focused more on policing the students than vetting and monitoring their own staff? In 2007, Jordan, a former Tustin High student, was buying boxes from a U-Haul next door to the school when he ran into Officer Howard, the former campus police. When they made eye contact, Jordan politely nodded and smiled, even though he never dealt with the officer before. "Jordan Smith, right?" the officer asked. "Yeah, but how do you know my name?" Jordan curiously questioned back. "I busted you a couple times, didn't I?" "No, I've never spoken to you before this moment." "Oh, I remember now. You were on the list." "What list?" What the hell. I don't work there anymore." There was a list of students that the school staff labeled as delinquents and likely to cause trouble for the school. To his shock, the officer then listed off a number of Jordan's friends from high school, before oddly smiling and walking away. Jordan stood there in place, still processing what had happened. How could the staff designate them as bad kids so easily? Jordan made it clear to us that the worst thing anyone in his group had done on campus was to ditch class. What made them zero in on this group of teenagers that proved to show no threat when it would seem the ones posing actual danger were those working on campus. In 2009, athletics trainer Hope Jacoby was arrested and charged with 8 felony counts, including 4 counts of unlawful sexual intercourse, 3 counts of oral copulation of a minor, and 1 count of distributing pornography to a minor. 24-year-old Jacoby admitted to having sex with a 16-year-old male student in her car and at her home on several different occasions throughout 2008. Controversially, she was sentenced to 3 years of informal probation and 240 hours of community service. Many in the community were upset by the outcome, believing she deserved a much stronger punishment. In 2009, campus was once again structurally updated, as if trying to shed its old tainted skin. A $22 million sports pavilion was built, along with many other renovations. Though they were able to change the face of the school grounds, the haunting memory of its historic bones remain. There are a myriad of stories about locals walking near or trespassing on the school grounds at night and seeing the spectral form of a young man gliding around the tennis courts. Others have seen him in his rollerblades, floating across the large grass fields, still practicing his moves. One tale speaks of a young girl who drowned at the campus pool. Some have heard her struggling in the pool, calling out for help, and when they rushed to assist, they would only find an empty pool with smooth, calm waters. In our investigation, we were unable to find any information on a girl drowning at the school aquatic center, but with the staff and authorities willing to hide corruption in their own ranks in the hopes to save the school's reputation, we have to wonder what else they've concealed from the public. What horrible truths have been buried by those tasked with the education and protection of our youth? We all had very different experiences from high school, depending on the years you were there, to the area you lived in. The one common experience we share are the rumors and legends that flood our institutions of education with mystery and conspiracy. We latch on to these chronicles, no matter their legitimacy or content, foolishly believing we may know the truth. But how can we ever know the accurate facts if they are being concealed and manipulated by the authorities in power in an attempt to protect themselves and uphold a falsely respectable image for the schools? Are we doomed to remain helpless in the dark, or can we find a way to shine a light on the dreadful events, false facts, and corrupt staff that infect our schools? We're left to ponder what morbid and shocking truths lie buried deep underneath the facade of guidance and community, and what disturbing accounts have yet to be told.